I'm Zoe, 22 years old, and I just graduated summa cum laude from University of Miami with a business degree. After 4 years of being called the disappointment by my stepfamily, I thought graduation day would finally prove my worth. Instead, as I walked across that stage, my father Richard stood up and shouted, "Don't get too comfortable, Zoe. Pack your bags when you get home. You've freeloaded long enough." The entire auditorium went silent. My heart shattered as my stepmother Natasha smirked from the audience. That's when I pulled out my phone, sent one text message, and waited for the surprise that would change everything. 20 minutes later, a gleaming white Mercedes-AMG pulled up outside the graduation venue, and my father's face went completely white. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. You see, my family has always been divided into two clear categories, the golden children and me. After my mother Grace died when I was 14, my father Richard quickly remarried Natasha, a woman who came with her own agenda and two children from her previous marriage. Trevor, now 26, and Iris, now 24, became the instant favorites in our household. While I was grieving the loss of my mother, trying to navigate high school, and desperately seeking my father's attention, Trevor and Iris were being handed everything on a silver platter. My father, Richard, is the CEO of a successful construction company in Miami. He built his empire from nothing, starting as a day laborer and working his way up to owning one of the largest commercial construction firms in South Florida. You'd think someone who understood hard work would appreciate it in his own daughter, but somehow, when it came to me, all that wisdom disappeared. Maybe it was guilt over my mother's death. Maybe it was Natasha's influence. Or maybe he just found it easier to love children who weren't constant reminders of the wife he'd lost. Natasha played her role perfectly from day one. She was the grieving widow's savior, stepping in to help Richard with his troubled daughter. In public, she was warm and motherly toward me. Behind closed doors, she made it crystal clear that I was an obstacle to her perfect blended family vision. "Your father has moved on, sweetie. Maybe it's time you did too." She had a way of making every family gathering feel like I was crashing someone else's party. Trevor, 4 years older than me, was handed a management position at Dad's company straight out of college, despite having no real construction experience. His degree was in communications, but somehow that qualified him to oversee multi-million-dollar projects. Iris, meanwhile, was studying fashion design at an expensive private college in New York, with Dad happily footing the bill for her Manhattan apartment, designer wardrobe, and regular shopping sprees. When she posted photos of her luxury lifestyle on social media, Dad would beam with pride, sharing every post like she was his greatest achievement. Meanwhile, I was working 2 part-time jobs throughout high school just to buy my own clothes and school supplies. When it came time for college applications, I was told that state school was good enough for someone with my limited potential. Never mind that I had a 3.9 GPA and scored in the 95th percentile on the SATs. Never mind that I'd been accepted to University of Miami with a partial academic scholarship. The remainder of my tuition came from student loans that I'd be paying back myself, while Trevor and Iris had their educations handed to them debt-free. The disparities were painful, but not surprising. What hurt more was the complete lack of interest in my achievements. When I made the dean's list every semester, there was no celebration, no acknowledgement, barely even a good job. When Trevor got promoted to senior project manager after just 1 year, Dad threw him a party and bought him a brand new BMW. When Iris had her first fashion show at school, the entire family flew to New York to support her. When I started my own small business during my sophomore year of college, selling social media marketing services to local restaurants, it was dismissed as playing around on the computer. But here's what my family never understood about me. Being underestimated was actually my greatest advantage. While they were busy writing me off, I was quietly building something they couldn't have imagined. That playing around on the computer had evolved into something much more significant than anyone realized. What started as helping a few restaurants with their Instagram accounts had grown into a full-service digital marketing agency. By my junior year, I was managing social media, websites, and online advertising for over 30 local businesses. The irony wasn't lost on me that I was succeeding in the one industry my family barely understood. Richard's construction company still operated like it was 1985.
word-of-mouth referrals, newspaper ads, and business cards at Chamber of Commerce meetings. While he was proud of his old-school approach, I was making more money in a month than most people my age made in a year, all through the power of digital marketing. My business partner, Kai, whom I'd met in an entrepreneurship class freshman year, was the only person who truly understood what we were building. While other students were focused on grades and parties, Kai and I were staying up until 3 a.m. working on client campaigns, optimizing ad spend, and scaling our operations. We'd started with a $500 investment split between us, money I'd saved from my part-time jobs, and by senior year, we were generating a six-figure annual revenue. The secret to our success was understanding something that traditional businesses in Miami were just beginning to grasp: the power of targeted digital advertising. We specialized in helping family-owned restaurants, local service providers, and small retail businesses compete with big chains by creating compelling online presences. While my family saw me as the disappointing daughter who spent too much time on her laptop, I was actually building the foundation for financial independence they'd never provided me.
But keeping this success hidden from my family became increasingly difficult as the numbers grew. Late-night client calls had to be taken in my car in the driveway. Business meetings were scheduled around family dinners. The constant stream of income flowing into my business account had to be carefully managed to avoid suspicious questions about where the money was coming from. As far as my family knew, I was still the struggling college student working part-time at a coffee shop to make ends meet. The truth was, by graduation day, I had enough money saved to buy a house, a luxury car, and still have a substantial emergency fund. But more importantly, I had something my stepfamily would never understand: the unshakable confidence that comes from building something valuable with your own hands. Every dismissive comment, every comparison to Trevor and Iris, every reminder that I was the disappointment had only fueled my determination to prove them wrong. As I sat in that graduation ceremony, listening to my father's humiliating announcement that I needed to pack my bags, I felt a strange sense of calm. Today wasn't just my graduation day. It was the day I'd finally show my family exactly who they'd been underestimating all these years. The white Mercedes waiting outside was just the beginning.
To understand how graduation day became such a turning point, you need to know the full story of how our blended family was formed and how the lines were drawn from the very beginning. When my mother, Grace, died of ovarian cancer, I lost more than just a parent. I lost my protector, my advocate, and the only person in the world who truly believed in my potential. Grace had been a teacher at a local elementary school, beloved by students and parents alike. She had this incredible ability to see the best in every child, to find their hidden talents and nurture them until they bloomed. With me, she was the same way. While other parents pushed their kids toward traditional paths, my mother encouraged my curiosity about business and technology. She bought me my first laptop when I was 12, not for games, but because she noticed how fascinated I was by how websites worked and how businesses marketed themselves online. She used to tell me, "You have an entrepreneurial spirit, sweetheart. Never let anyone convince you to make yourself smaller to fit their expectations." Those words became my mantra during the darkest years that followed her death. Richard met Natasha just 18 months after Mom's funeral, at a charity gala for the Children's Hospital where Grace had volunteered. Natasha was working as an event coordinator for the catering company, and according to the story they love to tell, she approached Richard to ask if he was enjoying the evening. She was recently divorced, struggling financially with 2 teenage children, and had perfected the art of appearing vulnerable while being calculating. Looking back, I can see how perfectly she played her cards. She never came on too strong, never pushed for commitment, just slowly inserted herself into our lives as the helpful, caring woman who understood what it was like to raise children alone.
She brought Trevor and Iris around gradually, always making sure they were on their best behavior during those early months. The four of them presented themselves as this ready-made family unit that Richard could step into, while I remained the grieving daughter who needed professional help to process my anger. Trevor was 19 when they moved in, already attending community college with plans to transfer to a four-year university. He was charming in that practiced way that comes naturally to people who've learned to manipulate situations to their advantage. He called Richard Sir and always offered to help with yard work or minor home repairs. What Richard saw as respect and initiative, I recognized as performance. Trevor had sized up the situation quickly. He'd found a wealthy stepfather who could provide opportunities his own absent father never could. Iris was 17, stunningly beautiful, and had inherited her mother's talent for reading people and telling them exactly what they wanted to hear. She bonded with Richard over his love of classic cars, asking thoughtful questions about his vintage Mustang and expressing interest in learning about engines. She never seemed to notice that I existed, except to occasionally comment on how difficult it must be for me to adjust to having a new family. The transformation in our household dynamics was swift and brutal. Natasha immediately instituted new rules about chores, curfews, and family time. Suddenly, I was expected to include Trevor and Iris in my plans with friends, to share my computer time, and to be grateful for their presence in our home. When I struggled with this adjustment, because, I was a 15-year-old who had just lost her mother, it was framed as me being selfish and resistant to change. Meanwhile, Trevor and Iris were held to completely different standards. When Trevor came home past curfew, it was because he was building relationships and networking. When Iris wanted to redecorate her room with expensive furniture, it was an investment in her creative development. When I asked for money for a school trip, I was told that I should learn the value of earning things for myself. But the financial disparities became more obvious as time went on. Richard opened college savings accounts for Trevor and Iris within 6 months of the marriage. He co-signed for Trevor's car loan and paid for Iris's SAT prep courses and college application fees. When I asked for college savings for myself, I was told that I should be grateful for the partial scholarship I had earned and that taking out student loans would teach me responsibility. But perhaps the most painful part was watching Richard become a different father to them than he had ever been to me. With Trevor, he was patient and encouraging, taking time to explain business concepts and including him in conversations about the construction company. With Iris, he was gentle and indulgent, attending her school performances and bragging about her artistic talent to anyone who would listen.
With me, he became increasingly distant and critical. My grades were never quite good enough, my part-time jobs were evidence that I wasn't managing my time properly, and my interest in digital marketing was dismissed as playing around on computers instead of learning real skills. Every conversation felt like a performance evaluation where I was perpetually falling short of unknown standards. Natasha masterfully orchestrated these dynamics while maintaining plausible deniability. She never openly favored her own children, but she had a talent for subtle manipulation. She'd praise Trevor's work ethic right after mentioning my messy room. She'd express concern about my social isolation right after highlighting Iris's popularity at school. She'd suggest family activities that aligned with Trevor and Iris's interests, while dismissing mine as too expensive or not suitable for the whole family. The worst part was that Richard genuinely believed he was being fair. When I tried to point out the disparities, I was accused of being jealous, ungrateful, or unable to appreciate what I had. "Natasha is trying so hard to make this work," he'd say. "Trevor and Iris have been through a lot too. Can't you just try to be part of the family?" But here's what nobody understood. I was trying to be part of the family. I just wasn't willing to erase myself to make room for everyone else's comfort. Every slight, every dismissal, every comparison to the golden children was teaching me something valuable about resilience and self-reliance. While Trevor was learning to depend on Richard's connections and Iris was learning to charm her way through life, I was learning to build something that belonged entirely to me. By my senior year of high school, I had stopped expecting fairness from my family. Instead, I channeled all that energy into my studies and my small but growing marketing experiments. I started a blog about local Miami businesses, began learning graphic design, and spent hours watching YouTube tutorials about social media advertising. While my family saw this as antisocial behavior, I was actually building the foundation for my future independence. The irony is that all of Natasha's efforts to marginalize me actually created the perfect conditions for my eventual success. Because I wasn't handed opportunities, I learned to create them. Because I wasn't given financial support, I learned to generate income. Because I wasn't included in family business discussions, I learned to understand business from the outside, which gave me a perspective that Trevor, despite his management position, would never have.
Starting college at the University of Miami felt like stepping into a parallel universe where merit actually mattered. For the first time since my mother's death, I was in an environment where my intelligence and work ethic were recognized and rewarded. But even as I thrived academically, the financial pressure from my family's neglect pushed me toward decisions that would change everything. My partial academic scholarship covered about 60% of my tuition, leaving me with roughly $15,000 per year in expenses that my father refused to help with. It builds character, he'd say, while simultaneously writing checks for Iris's expensive art supplies and Trevor's networking dinners. I was working 25 hours a week at a campus coffee shop, earning barely enough to cover my meal plan and textbooks, let alone rent for the tiny off-campus apartment I shared with 3 other scholarship students. It was during my sophomore year in Professor Martinez's digital marketing course that I first realized the internet could be more than just a tool for research and social media. Professor Martinez was a former advertising executive who'd worked with major brands in New York before deciding to teach. Unlike my family, he saw potential in my questions about online consumer behavior and my observations about how local businesses were failing to reach younger customers. You have an intuitive understanding of digital strategy that most executives pay consultants thousands to learn, he told me after class one day. Have you ever considered freelancing? That conversation planted a seed that would grow into something my family could never have imagined. I started small, offering to help local restaurants near campus improve their social media presence for $200 per month. My first client was Rosa's Cuban Kitchen, a family-owned restaurant that had been struggling to compete with newer establishments. The owner, Mrs. Delgado, was skeptical about hiring a college student, but she was desperate enough to try anything. Within 3 months, I had increased Rosa's Instagram following from 300 to 3,000 genuine local followers. More importantly, I had implemented a targeted Facebook advertising strategy that increased their weekday lunch traffic by 40%. Mrs. Delgado was so impressed that she referred me to her brother, who owned a small auto repair shop, and her cousin, who ran a boutique in Coral Gables. What my family saw as me always being on that computer was actually at the beginning of a carefully planned business strategy. I was studying successful digital marketing campaigns, learning about analytics and conversion optimization, and most importantly, understanding how to scale small business operations efficiently. While Trevor was learning to manage construction projects through trial and error at Dad's company, I was mastering skills that could be applied to any industry, anywhere in the world. By the end of sophomore year, I was managing social media and digital advertising for 8 local businesses, generating about $2,500 per month in revenue. Not bad for a college student, but I knew it was just the beginning. That's when I met Kai in our entrepreneurship and innovation seminar. Kai was a computer science major with a business minor, originally from California, whose parents had moved to Miami for work. Unlike most of our classmates who talked about starting businesses someday, Kai was already building things. He'd created apps for local nonprofits, designed websites for professors, and had a natural talent for understanding complex technical systems. "You know what your problem is," he said after I'd presented my business model to our class? "You're thinking too small. Instead of managing social media for 8 businesses, you should be building systems that could manage it for 80 businesses." That conversation led to our partnership and changed the trajectory of everything.
Kai brought the technical expertise I lacked, while I brought the marketing knowledge and client relationships he needed. Together, we started developing automated tools for social media management, email marketing campaigns, and customer relationship management specifically designed for small businesses. What had been manual, time-intensive work for me became streamlined, scalable processes that could serve multiple clients simultaneously. By junior year, we'd incorporated as Coastal Digital Solutions and were generating over $8,000 per month in revenue. We'd moved beyond just social media management to offer comprehensive digital marketing packages, including website design, search engine optimization, and paid advertising management. Our client base had expanded from restaurants and retail shops to include real estate agents, medical practices, and even a few small law firms.
The best part was that our services were producing real, measurable results for our clients. Dr. Patricia Ruiz, a dermatologist who hired us to improve her online presence, saw her new patient bookings increase by 150% in 6 months. Miami Beach Fitness, a small gym competing with national chains, increased their membership by 300 new clients after we revamped their digital strategy. But keeping this success hidden from my family became increasingly challenging as our business grew. I had to be careful about checking my business bank account when anyone was around. Client calls had to be scheduled around family dinners and taken outside or in my car. When packages arrived at the house containing marketing materials or business supplies, I'd have to intercept them before anyone could ask questions. The financial discipline required by this secrecy actually helped our business grow faster. Instead of spending money on typical college luxuries, every dollar was reinvested into better software, improved advertising campaigns, or expanding our service offerings. While my stepfamily assumed I was scraping by on coffee shop wages, I was actually building substantial savings and reinvesting in business growth. Kai and I developed a routine of working late nights in the university library, then moving to 24-hour cafes when the library closed. We'd often work until 3 a.m., optimizing ad campaigns, analyzing performance data, and planning expansion strategies. Other students thought we were just really dedicated to our studies, which wasn't entirely wrong. We were just studying our own business instead of textbooks. The emotional toll of living this double life was significant, though. Every family gathering became an exercise in dodging questions about my future plans and listening to endless praise for Trevor's real-world experience and Iris's artistic vision. When relatives asked about my major, Richard would dismissively say, "Oh, Zoe's studying marketing or something. She spends all her time on computers." If he only knew that those computers were generating more profit than many traditional businesses. The worst part was watching Iris drop out of her expensive New York fashion program after just 2 years, claiming she needed to find herself. Richard immediately welcomed her home and started funding her various artistic pursuits, from pottery classes to jewelry-making workshops. Meanwhile, I was maintaining a 3.8 GPA while running a business that was approaching 6-figure annual revenue, and nobody in my family even asked about my grades anymore. But every dismissive comment, every comparison to the golden children, every reminder that I was wasting my potential only fueled my determination to build something undeniable. By senior year, Coastal Digital Solutions was managing digital marketing for over 40 clients across South Florida, had 2 part-time employees, and was generating enough revenue for me to have paid off my student loans and still have substantial savings. The Mercedes-AMG that would soon shock my family wasn't bought on credit or financed through questionable means. It was purchased outright with money I'd earned through intelligence, hard work, and the kind of strategic thinking that my family had never bothered to recognize. Graduation day would finally give me the opportunity to show them exactly what they'd been underestimating all these years.
Senior year brought challenges I never could have anticipated. Coastal Digital Solutions was growing so rapidly that Kai and I could barely keep up with demand. Yet I still had to maintain the facade of being a struggling college student to avoid suspicion from my family. The contrast between my public and private life had become almost surreal.
By September of my final year, we were managing digital marketing campaigns for 63 businesses across South Florida. Our monthly revenue had exceeding $15,000, and we were reinvesting about 70% back into the business for growth. The remaining 30% was more than enough to cover all my college expenses, build substantial savings, and even start making some significant purchases. Carefully, of course. The key to our rapid expansion was the referral system we'd developed. Every satisfied client became a salesperson for our services, and Miami's tight-knit business community worked in our favor. When Dr. Ruiz recommended us to 3 other medical practices, and Miami Beach Fitness referred us to 5 other gyms and wellness centers, we realized we tapped into something powerful. Small business owners trusted recommendations from their peers more than any advertising we could have purchased. Kai had developed proprietary software that automated much of our social media posting, email marketing, and performance reporting. What used to take us hours of manual work per client now happened automatically, allowing us to take on more clients without proportionately increasing our workload. We were essentially creating a scalable marketing machine that could grow infinitely without being limited by time constraints. The sophistication of our operation would have impressed even seasoned marketing professionals. We had detailed analytics dashboards for every client, A/B testing protocols for all advertisements, and conversion tracking systems that could pinpoint exactly which marketing efforts were generating the most revenue. While Trevor was learning construction management through trial and error, I was mastering data-driven business optimization that could be applied to any industry. Our client retention rate was over 95%, which meant that almost every business that hired us stayed with us long-term. This wasn't just because our services worked, though they definitely did, but because we developed genuine relationships with business owners who appreciated our dedication and results. Mrs. Delgado from Rose's Cuban Kitchen had become like a second mother to me, always asking about my studies and offering career advice. The irony wasn't lost on me that I had better relationships with my clients than with my own family. These business owners valued my intelligence, sought my advice on important decisions, and celebrated my successes. Meanwhile, at home, I was still treated like the disappointing daughter who spent too much time on computers. Managing the financial aspects of our success while keeping it secret required creativity and careful planning. I opened multiple business bank accounts under our company name, keeping personal withdrawals minimal and strategic. When I needed to explain any unusual purchases to my family, I'd claim they were gifts from my roommates or items I'd bought secondhand. The new laptop I needed for business was supposedly a lucky find at a pawn shop. The professional camera equipment for client photo shoots was borrowed from a friend in the journalism program. Living this double life became exhausting, but it also taught me valuable lessons about discretion and financial management that would serve me well in the future. Every purchase had to be justified, every expense had to be explained, and every success had to be hidden. In many ways, this forced discipline made our business more profitable because we couldn't waste money on unnecessary luxuries or status symbols. The most challenging part was watching my family's continued dismissal of my potential while I was achieving more than they could have imagined. During Thanksgiving dinner of my senior year, Richard spent 20 minutes bragging about Trevor's latest promotion to senior project manager at the construction company. Trevor's new responsibilities included overseeing 3 mid-level projects and managing a team of 5 employees. Impressive for someone his age, but nothing compared to what Kai and I were accomplishing. Meanwhile, when Iris announced she was starting a jewelry making business and needed $5,000 for supplies and a booth at local craft fairs, Richard immediately wrote her a check. "I believe in supporting family dreams," he said, looking directly at me as if to emphasize that my dreams weren't worthy of similar support. What he didn't know was that Iris's entire business budget was less than what I typically generated in revenue during a slow week.
The secrecy became even more difficult when clients started insisting on meeting in person for strategy sessions. I had to coordinate these meetings around my class schedule and family obligations, often driving to coffee shops or restaurants far from campus to avoid being seen by anyone who might know my family.
When Mrs. Chen, who owned 3 successful nail salons, wanted to discuss expanding our services to include website development, we met at a Starbucks in Fort Lauderdale during my supposed study group session. These in-person meetings were crucial for building trust and understanding our clients' needs, but they also revealed how much my business relationships differed from my family dynamics. Business owners treated me as an equal, valued my insights, and trusted me with important decisions affecting their livelihoods. At home, I couldn't even get my family to take my college major seriously. One of our biggest breakthrough moments came when Vincent Torres, a successful real estate investor with properties throughout Miami-Dade County, hired us to manage marketing for his entire portfolio. Vincent had initially been skeptical about working with college students, but our results for his first property, a luxury condo building in Brickell, convinced him to expand our partnership. "You two understand digital marketing better than agencies charging 10 times your rates," Vincent told us during a strategy meeting. "I don't care how old you are or where you went to school, results speak louder than credentials." His endorsement led to contracts with 6 other real estate investors and property management companies, adding over $4,000 per month to our revenue. By February of senior year, Coastal Digital Solutions was generating enough profit for me to have purchased that Mercedes-AMG outright, along with a substantial investment portfolio and enough savings to live comfortably for several years without working. But more importantly, we'd built something sustainable and scalable that could continue growing long after graduation. The business had taught me lessons about leadership, strategy, and resilience that no classroom could have provided. I'd learned to manage client expectations, resolve conflicts between team members, and make difficult decisions under pressure. While my family saw me as the irresponsible daughter who spent too much time on computers, I was actually developing executive-level skills that would serve me throughout my career. As graduation approached, I found myself facing a difficult decision. Should I continue hiding my success to maintain family peace, or was it time to reveal the truth and claim the recognition I'd earned? The answer came sooner than expected, in the form of my father's humiliating graduation day announcement that it was time for me to pack my bags and stop freeloading. That moment crystallized everything for me. I'd spent 4 years building something remarkable while being treated like a burden by people who should have been my biggest supporters. It was time to show them exactly who they'd been underestimating.
The months leading up to graduation were marked by an escalation in family tensions that made my secret double life even more challenging to maintain. It was as if Natasha sensed that something was about to change, and she ramped up her efforts to ensure I remained marginalized in the family hierarchy. What she didn't realize was that every cruel comment and dismissive gesture was only strengthening my resolve to prove them all wrong. The trouble started in January when Trevor announced his engagement to his longtime girlfriend, Madison, a social media influencer with 50,000 Instagram followers who specialized in luxury lifestyle content. Richard was over the moon, immediately offering to pay for an elaborate engagement party and promising to contribute significantly to their wedding expenses. The party alone cost more than my entire college tuition for a year, but when I mentioned needing money for my final semester textbooks, I was told that I should have planned better and saved money from my coffee shop job. Madison's presence in our family dynamic added a new layer of complexity to my situation. She was constantly documenting everything for her social media accounts, which meant I had to be even more careful about keeping my business activities hidden. Her posts about family gatherings and supporting each other's dreams felt like mockery when I was sitting right there achieving more than anyone knew while being treated like an afterthought. The engagement party was held at the Miami Beach Resort with over 200 guests, including Richard's business associates, Natasha's extended family, and Madison's influencer friends. I watched my father give a speech about how proud he was of Trevor's accomplishments and how excited he was to welcome Madison into our family. He talked about the importance of supporting young people as they build their futures, seemingly oblivious to the irony of his words. During the party, I overheard conversations that revealed just how differently my family spoke about me when they thought I wasn't listening. "Zoe's still figuring things out," Natasha told a group of her friends. "She's always been more of a dreamer than a doer, you know? Some children just need more time to mature." Richard nodded along, adding, "We're hoping graduation will be a wake-up call for her to get serious about her future." Those words stung more than I expected, not because they hurt my feelings, but because they revealed how completely clueless my family was about who I'd become. While they were discussing my supposed lack of direction, I was in the middle of negotiating a major contract with a hotel chain that wanted us to manage digital marketing for their 5 South Florida properties. The irony was almost too much to bear. Iris's behavior during this period became increasingly hostile, as if she sensed that her position as the favorite was somehow threatened. She made pointed comments about my clothes, my social life, and my future prospects. "Don't you think it's weird that Zoe never brings anyone home? Like, doesn't she have any friends or dating prospects? Maybe she's just not good with people." The comment was designed to sting, and it succeeded, but not for the reasons she thought. The truth was, I had plenty of friends, and even a developing romantic relationship with Noah, a fellow entrepreneur I'd met through our business network. Noah owned a successful app development company and was one of the few people outside of Kai who knew the full extent of my business success. But I'd kept him away from family gatherings because I knew they'd find ways to diminish or dismiss him, just like they did with everything else in my life. The financial disparity between how my achievements were treated versus Trevor and Iris's became even more apparent as graduation approached. When Iris decided she wanted to start a photography business, Richard immediately bought her a $3,000 camera setup and paid for professional photography courses. When Trevor mentioned wanting to get his MBA eventually, Richard started researching programs and discussing how the family would support his continued education. Meanwhile, when I casually mentioned that I'd been thinking about graduate school, the response was lukewarm at best. "Maybe you should get some real work experience first," Richard suggested. "See how the business world actually operates before committing to more school." What he didn't know was that I had more practical business experience than most MBA graduates and was already earning more than many people with advanced degrees.
The most frustrating part was watching my family make financial decisions that would have been completely unnecessary if they'd bothered to understand what I was accomplishing. Richard complained about cash flow issues with the construction company, mentioning that several major projects had been delayed and that he was concerned about meeting payroll for the next quarter. Meanwhile, Coastal Digital Solutions was generating enough profit that I could have easily helped with family finances, if I'd been treated like an actual family member whose contributions mattered. Natasha's manipulative behavior reached new heights during this period. She started making comments about how I'd need to find my own place after graduation because it wasn't fair for Trevor and Madison to feel like they couldn't visit freely. "Young married couples need their space," she'd say, as if my presence in my childhood home was an imposition rather than a right. The irony was that I'd already been looking at luxury condos in downtown Miami, but I couldn't share that information without revealing my financial situation. The breaking point came during a family dinner in March when Richard announced that he was promoting Trevor to vice president of operations, making him second in command of the entire construction company. The promotion came with a substantial salary increase, company car, and equity stake in the business. I want to start transitioning more responsibility to the next generation. Trevor has proven himself ready for leadership. When I asked if there might be opportunities for me to contribute to the family business after graduation, perhaps in marketing or business development, areas where I had relevant skills, the suggestion was dismissed almost immediately. Construction is a relationship business, Zoe. It takes years to understand the industry and build credibility with clients. Maybe after you get some experience in corporate marketing, we could discuss entry-level positions. Entry-level positions. After building a 6-figure business and managing marketing campaigns for dozens of successful companies, I was being offered the possibility of maybe someday being considered for entry-level work in my own family's company. The disconnect was so profound that I almost laughed, but the pain of being so thoroughly underestimated by people who were supposed to love and support me was overwhelming.
That night, I called Kai and told him about the dinner conversation. "You know what I think?" he said. "I think graduation day should be when you stop hiding who you really are. You've spent 4 years proving yourself to people who refuse to see your worth. Maybe it's time to let everyone else see what they've been missing." His words planted a seed that would grow into the plan that would change everything. If my family wanted to treat me like a disappointment, fine. But graduation day would be when they learned exactly how wrong they'd been about everything.
The morning of graduation dawned with that perfect Miami sunshine that makes everything look like a postcard. I woke up at 5 a.m., not because I was nervous about the ceremony, but because I had final preparations to make for what would become the most dramatic day in my family's history. While my family slept peacefully, assuming this would be just another milestone where they could offer polite congratulations before reminding me to get serious about my future, I was putting the finishing touches on a plan that would shatter every assumption they'd ever made about me. Kai and I had spent the previous week coordinating every detail. The Mercedes-AMG C63S was scheduled to arrive at precisely 2:30 p.m., exactly 30 minutes after the graduation ceremony ended. Vincent Torres, our real estate investor client who had become something of a mentor, had agreed to drive it over from the dealership where I'd purchased it the month before. The timing was crucial. I wanted my family to experience the full emotional whiplash of humiliating me and then immediately being confronted with evidence of my success. The car itself was more than just a status symbol, though it certainly served that purpose. I'd chosen the AMG specifically because it represented everything my family thought I could never achieve. It was expensive, sophisticated, and required the kind of financial success they believed I was incapable of generating. The gleaming white exterior with black accents would be impossible to ignore when it pulled up outside the graduation venue. But the Mercedes was just the opening act. I had prepared a comprehensive presentation of Coastal Digital Solutions success metrics, client testimonials, and financial statements to share with my family after the initial shock wore off. Screenshots of our business bank accounts, copies of major client contracts, and documentation of the marketing campaigns that had generated millions in revenue for our clients. I wanted to leave no room for doubt about what I'd accomplished. Getting ready that morning felt surreal. I put on my cap and gown, knowing that in a few hours, this outfit would be the last symbol of my family's perception of me as an underachieving college student. I looked at myself in the mirror and saw someone completely different from the person my family thought they knew. The scared, grieving 15-year-old who had lost her mother and been pushed aside by her new stepfamily was gone, replaced by a confident businesswoman who had built something remarkable from nothing. My phone buzzed with final confirmations from the team. Kai texted that he'd be recording everything from a discreet distance. We wanted documentation of my family's reactions for posterity. Noah sent encouragement and promised to be waiting nearby to celebrate afterward. Vincent confirmed that the Mercedes was detailed and ready for its dramatic debut. Even Mrs. Delgado from Rose's Cuban Kitchen, who had become like family to me, sent a text saying she was proud of me and that my mother would be too. The contrast between the support I received from my chosen family of clients and friends versus the dismissive attitude from my biological family was stark. People who had only known me for a few years recognized and celebrated my achievements, while people who had raised me remained willfully blind to my potential. Breakfast with my family was a perfect microcosm of our dysfunction. Richard spent the entire meal checking his phone and discussing construction project delays with Trevor, barely acknowledging that this was supposed to be my special day. Natasha made passive-aggressive comments about how I'd need to start contributing to household expenses now that I was a college graduate, apparently unaware that I could have bought their house outright with my business savings. Iris complained about having to attend the ceremony because it conflicted with a photo shoot for her struggling photography business, the same business that had generated exactly zero profit despite thousands of dollars in equipment purchases from Richard. Trevor, ever the golden child, pontificated about the importance of real-world experience and suggested that I should consider applying for entry-level positions at his company's subcontractors.
The construction industry is all about proving yourself from the ground up. You can't just expect opportunities to be handed to you. The irony was so thick, I could have cut it with a knife, but I just smiled and nodded, knowing that in a few hours he'd be eating those words.
The drive to the University of Miami campus was filled with stilted conversation and false enthusiasm. Richard drove while Natasha sat in the passenger seat, both of them checking their phones more than they spoke to me. Trevor and Iris were in their own car behind us, probably discussing how boring the ceremony would be and making plans for afterward that didn't include celebrating my achievements. As we parked outside the venue, I felt a strange calm descend over me. This was the last time my family would see me as the disappointing daughter who needed their guidance and support. In less than 3 hours, everything would change forever. The graduation ceremony itself felt like an out-of-body experience. I sat with my fellow graduates, listening to speeches about following our dreams and making our mark on the world, while my family sat in the audience, probably checking their watches and planning their exit strategy. When my name was called and I walked across that stage to receive my diploma, I saw Richard stand up and applaud politely, more out of obligation than pride. What happened next would become family legend, though not for the reasons anyone expected. As I descended the steps from the stage, diploma in hand, I saw Richard stand up in the audience. Instead of the proud father congratulating his daughter's achievement, his face was set with determination and what looked like embarrassment. "Don't get too comfortable, Zoe," he called out, his voice carrying across the crowd of families celebrating their graduates. "Pack your bags when you get home. You've freeloaded long enough." The words hit the quiet auditorium like a slap, causing dozens of heads to turn and witness my public humiliation. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now, back to the story. I felt every eye in that auditorium on me as my father's words echoed through the space. Families who had been celebrating their own children's achievements suddenly became spectators to my humiliation. I saw professors who had taught me, classmates who had studied with me, and strangers who had never met me all witnessing what should have been my moment of triumph being turned into my moment of shame. But instead of the devastation my family expected to see, I pulled out my phone and sent a single text message. "It's time." Then I looked directly at Richard and smiled. Not the defeated smile of someone who had been crushed, but the confident smile of someone who was about to win the biggest victory of their life. "We'll see about that, Dad," I said, my voice carrying just as clearly as his had. "We'll see about that." The next 20 minutes felt like the longest 20 minutes of my life. I mingled with other graduates and their families outside the venue, accepting congratulations and making small talk while internally counting down to the moment that would change everything. My family stood in a tight cluster nearby, Richard looking satisfied with himself for delivering what he clearly thought was a necessary wake-up call, while Natasha, Trevor, and Iris whispered among themselves about my attitude problem. I watched other families celebrating, taking photos, making dinner plans, talking excitedly about their graduates' future prospects. The contrast with my own family's behavior was stark and painful, but it also reinforced my conviction that what I was about to do was absolutely necessary. They needed to understand exactly who they'd been dismissing all these years. At exactly 2:30 p.m., I heard the deep rumble of a high-performance engine approaching the campus. My heart started racing as I recognized the distinctive sound of the AMG's V8 engine. Other people around us began turning their heads toward the parking area as the sound grew louder and more impressive. Even in Miami, where luxury cars weren't uncommon, the aggressive exhaust note of a Mercedes-AMG C63S commanded attention. Then I saw it. Gleaming white with black accents, looking like something out of a luxury car magazine as it turned into the graduation venue parking area. The late afternoon sun reflected off its pristine paint job, and the carbon fiber spoiler and aggressive front splitter left no doubt that this was a serious performance machine. Vincent Torres was behind the wheel, wearing sunglasses and looking every inch the successful businessman he was.
The car moved slowly through the parking lot, as if giving everyone time to appreciate its presence. Conversations around us began shifting from graduation talk to automotive admiration. "Is that the new AMG C63?" I heard someone ask. "Those things cost like 80 grand," another person replied. My family, still clustered together and continuing their discussion about my supposed irresponsibility, hadn't noticed the car yet. Vincent parked directly in front of the main walkway where families were gathered, positioning the Mercedes so it would be impossible to ignore. As he stepped out of the car, several people nearby stopped their conversations entirely. Vincent was an imposing figure, tall, well-dressed, and carrying himself with the confidence that came from years of successful business dealings. He looked around the crowd until he spotted me, then began walking in my direction. That's when my family finally noticed what was happening. Richard was the first to look up from his phone, his expression changing from mild interest to confusion as he watched this obviously successful businessman approaching our group. Natasha followed his gaze, her eyes widening as she took in the expensive car and Vincent's professional appearance. Trevor, ever the skeptic, stepped forward with a forced laugh. "Business clients, I think there might be some confusion here. Zoe's just a college student. She works at a coffee shop."
Vincent's eyebrows raised slightly, and he looked at me with what might have been amusement. "Is that so?" He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a set of keys. Not just any keys, but the distinctive Mercedes key fob with its three-pointed star logo clearly visible. "Well, college student or not, she's earned these." The silence that followed was deafening. My family stared at the keys in Vincent's hand as if they were looking at an alien artifact. Other families nearby had noticed the exchange and were watching with interest, probably wondering what drama was unfolding at the graduation ceremony. "I don't understand," Natasha said, her voice higher than usual. "Earned what, exactly?" Vincent looked at me for permission, and I nodded. This was the moment I'd been building toward for months. "The Mercedes-AMG C63S, he said, gesturing toward the gleaming white car. "Zoe purchased it last month, paid in full, I might add. I've just been keeping it safe until graduation day." The impact of his words was immediate and devastating. Richard's face went completely pale, then flushed red as the implications hit him. Trevor's mouth actually fell open, and for once in his life, he seemed completely speechless. Iris let out a small gasp and took a step backward, as if the news was physically pushing her away. Natasha's carefully composed expression cracked entirely, revealing the shock and fear underneath. "That's impossible," Trevor finally managed to say. That car costs $87,000, I said calmly, speaking for the first time since Vincent's revelation, plus tax, title, and dealer fees. Total came to just over $93,000. I paid cash. The word cash seemed to echo in the sudden silence. Around us, other families had stopped pretending not to listen and were openly staring at our group. Some looked impressed, others seemed confused by the obvious family drama playing out in front of them. Richard found his voice first, though it came out as barely more than a whisper. "How is that possible? Where would you get that kind of money?" The question carried undertones of accusation, as if I suspected I'd done something illegal or inappropriate to acquire such wealth. Vincent stepped in smoothly, his business experience showing in how he handled the tension. From her business, of course. Coastal Digital Solutions has been one of the most effective marketing agencies I've ever worked with. They've generated over $2 million in additional revenue from my properties alone. He looked at Richard with something that might have been pity. "You didn't know about her company?" The answer was written all over my family's faces. Not only did they not know about my business, they had never even bothered to ask what I was actually doing with my time. 4 years of dismissing my computer work as playing around had blinded them to the reality that I was building something remarkable. I held out my hand, and Vincent placed the keys in my palm. The weight of them felt symbolic, not just of the car, but of everything I'd accomplished while my family remained oblivious. "Thank you for taking care of her," I said to Vincent, "and thank you for being here today. It means more than you know." As Vincent walked back toward his own car to leave, my family remained frozen in stunned silence, staring at me as if they were seeing me for the first time. And in many ways,
They were. The silence stretched on for what felt like an eternity, broken only by the sound of Vincent's car starting and driving away. My family stood there like statues, their brains apparently struggling to process the information they'd just received. I could practically see the gears turning as they tried to reconcile the daughter they thought they knew with the successful businesswoman standing before them holding the keys to a luxury performance car. Richard was the first to break the silence, his voice shaky and uncertain. "Zoe, I need you to explain what just happened, right now." There was no authority in his tone anymore, no parental command. For the first time in years, he was speaking to me as an equal, maybe even as someone he needed to understand rather than control. I looked around at the families still celebrating nearby, some stealing glances at our dramatic scene. This wasn't the place for a detailed explanation, but they deserved to understand the magnitude of what they'd missed. "Dad, I've been running a successful digital marketing agency for the past 3 years, Coastal Digital Solutions. We manage online marketing for over 60 businesses across South Florida." 60 businesses? Iris repeated, her voice barely above a whisper. "That's not possible. You work at a coffee shop." "I worked at a coffee shop during my freshman year. I quit that job 3 years ago when my business income exceeded what I was making hourly. By quite a lot, actually." I pressed the button on my key fob, and the Mercedes responded with a brief chirp and flash of its lights. The sound seemed to snap my family back to reality. Trevor, ever the skeptic, stepped forward with his arms crossed. "Okay, let's say you really do have some kind of business. There's no way a college student could afford a car like that. What did you do? Max out credit cards? Take out loans?" His tone suggested he was grasping for any explanation that would make this make sense within his worldview. I pulled out my phone and opened my business banking app, angling the screen so they could all see the account balance. The number displayed was $347,892.53. And that's just one of 3 business accounts. No loans, no credit cards. This is what happens when you build something valuable and reinvest the profits intelligently. Natasha actually staggered backward when she saw the number, her hand flying to her chest. That's more money than most people make in 10 years. Her voice carried a note of something I'd never heard from her before. Respect mixed with fear? "Actually, that's just my operating account. My investment portfolio is substantially larger. And this doesn't include the value of the business itself, which we had professionally appraised last month at just over $1.2 million. I let that number hang in the air for a moment. "So when you told me to pack my bags because I've been freeloading, Dad, I thought you should know that I could actually buy your house outright and still have enough left over to start 2 more businesses." The color drained from Richard's face completely. I knew he had been struggling with cash flow issues at his construction company, worrying about meeting payroll and managing project delays. The irony that his supposedly irresponsible daughter had more liquid assets than his 40-year-old company wasn't lost on any of us. "But how?" he asked, his voice barely audible. "How did we not know? How did you hide all of this?" "I didn't hide it, Dad. You just never bothered to ask. For 3 years, every time you saw me working on my laptop, you dismissed it as wasting time on the computer. Every late night, every weekend I spent working on client projects, you assumed I was just playing around online." I walked toward the Mercedes, my family following like they were in a trance. When Mrs. Chen wanted to expand her nail salon business, we hired her to create a digital marketing strategy that increased her revenue by 40% in 6 months. When Dr. Patel needed to build an online presence for his new medical practice, we designed his website and managed his advertising campaign. When the Miami Beach fitness chain wanted to compete with national gyms, we developed their social media strategy and helped them sign 300 new members. With each example, I could see the reality hitting them harder.
These weren't theoretical achievements or college projects. These were real businesses, real results, real money changing hands. And I had been the architect of all of it, while they remained completely oblivious.
Vincent Torres, the man who just delivered my car, owns 15 properties worth over $30 million, I continued, running my hand along the Mercedes' pristine hood. Our marketing campaigns have helped him increase occupancy rates, raise rental prices, and reduce vacancy periods. In the past year alone, we've generated over $2 million in additional revenue for his portfolio. Trevor was shaking his head in disbelief. This doesn't make sense. If you were making this kind of money, why didn't you move out? Why did you stay in your childhood bedroom like a loser? I finished for him. Is that what you were going to say? I opened the driver's door of the Mercedes and slid behind the wheel, adjusting the seat and mirrors. The interior was even more impressive than I remembered. Black leather with carbon fiber accents, a state-of-the-art infotainment system, and the kind of attention to detail that justified the car's premium price. I stayed because this was my home, I said, looking at them through the open door. Because despite everything, I hoped that eventually you'd see me for who I really was instead of who you assumed I was. I thought that maybe, just maybe, my own family might eventually notice that I was actually succeeding beyond their wildest expectations. The engine started with a deep, satisfying rumble that drew appreciative looks from car enthusiasts in the parking lot. The sound was intoxicating. 503 horsepower of German engineering responding to my command. But more than the car itself, it represented validation of every late night, every client meeting, every moment I'd been dismissed by the people who were supposed to believe in me. My business partner Kai and I have been featured in 3 different business publications. We've been invited to speak at marketing conferences. We have a waiting list of potential clients because our reputation for results is so strong. The University of Miami's business school has asked us to guest lecture about entrepreneurship. I could see Natasha calculating something in her head, probably trying to figure out how this news affected her position in the family hierarchy. Trevor looked like he was going to be sick, finally understanding that his little stepsister had achieved more than he ever would in his handed-to-him position at Richard's company. Iris seemed to be questioning everything she thought she knew about success and achievement. But it was Richard's expression that broke my heart the most. For the first time, I saw genuine regret in his eyes. The dawning realization of how badly he'd misjudged his own daughter. How many opportunities he'd missed to be proud of me, to support me, to celebrate my achievements alongside me instead of dismissing them. "Zoe," he said softly, stepping closer to the car. "I had no idea. We had no idea. What can we do to—" I held up my hand to stop him. The time for apologies would come later, but right now I needed them to understand the full scope of what they'd missed. "Dad, there's more you need to know." I stepped out of the Mercedes and faced my family directly, knowing that what I was about to share would complete their understanding of just how dramatically they had misjudged me. The warm Miami afternoon sun beat down on us as other graduation families continued their celebrations nearby, but our little group existed in its own bubble of shock and revelation. The business success is just part of the story, I began, my voice steady and confident. What you really need to understand is how deliberately I had to hide all of this from you. Not because I wanted to keep secrets, but because this family made it impossible for me to share my achievements. I pulled out my phone again and opened my photo gallery, scrolling to a folder labeled Business Milestones. The first image showed me and Kai at our first major client presentation, both of us in professional attire, standing in front of a boardroom full of executives. This was taken 18 months ago when we pitched our services to the Meridian Hotel Group. We won the contract, and it's worth $180,000 annually. Natasha leaned forward to look at the photo, her expression shifting from shock to something approaching panic.
In the image, I looked confident, professional, and completely at ease in a high-stakes business environment. Nothing like the aimless college student she thought she knew. This photo, I continued swiping to the next image, was taken at the South Florida Business Awards ceremony 6 months ago. Coastal Digital Solutions won the Rising Star Award for fastest growing marketing agency. The picture showed me holding a crystal trophy standing between two established business owners who looked at me with obvious respect. Trevor was staring at the photos with a mixture of disbelief and what might have been jealousy. Why didn't you tell us about any of this? Why would you keep something this big a secret? I laughed, but there was no humor in it. Tell you? Trevor, 3 months ago at dinner, I mentioned that I was working on an interesting project for a client, and you interrupted me to explain why real business happens face to face, not on computers. Last Christmas, when I tried to share that I'd been invited to speak at a marketing conference, Iris rolled her eyes and said I was probably just making things up to sound important. The specific examples hit them like physical blows. I could see recognition dawning as they remembered their dismissive responses to my attempts to share my success. Every time I tried to tell this family about my achievements, I was either ignored, dismissed, or told that I was wasting my time. So I stopped trying. I learned to live a completely separate life where people actually valued what I was building. Richard stepped forward, his hands raised in a placating gesture. Zoe, we made mistakes. Clearly, we made huge mistakes, but this changes everything. You're obviously incredibly successful, and we want to be part of that. We want to support you. Support me? The words came out sharper than I intended. Dad, 2 hours ago, you publicly humiliated me at my own graduation ceremony. You told me to pack my bags because I was freeloading. You did that in front of hundreds of people without knowing anything about my actual situation. Natasha finally found her voice, though it trembled slightly. We thought we were helping you become more independent. We didn't know about all this, she gestured vaguely toward the Mercedes in my phone. You thought you were helping? I scrolled to another photo, this one showing the luxury downtown condo I'd been secretly shopping for. Natasha, you've spent 2 years telling me I needed to find my own place because I was a burden on your marriage. Well, good news, I put an offer on a penthouse condo in Brickell last week. 2 bedrooms, 2 baths, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Biscayne Bay. I'm paying cash. The number, $650,000, was visible on the real estate listing in the photo. Natasha actually stumbled backwards, grabbing Trevor for support. But here's what really bothers me, I continued, my voice gaining strength with each word. It's not just that you didn't know about my success. It's that you actively chose not to know. You chose to see me as a disappointment because it was easier than recognizing that I might be achieving something you didn't understand. I opened another app on my phone, this one showing our client management system. 63 active clients, average monthly retainer of $2,400, client retention rate of 96%. These aren't lucky breaks or beginner's luck. This is sustained professional success built over 3 years of 18-hour workdays and constant learning. Iris, who had been silent throughout this revelation, finally spoke up. But you never acted like you had money. You still wore the same clothes, drove that old Honda, never went on expensive trips.
Because I was reinvesting everything into the business and saving for my future, I explained. Unlike some people in this family, I didn't need to broadcast my success with expensive purchases to feel validated. I was building something sustainable. The comment about expensive purchases hit home. Iris's photography equipment, Trevor's luxury lifestyle, all funded by Richard's indulgence. They had been living off his success while I was quietly building my own. The Honda, I continued, was a choice. I kept driving it because it was reliable and because I didn't want to answer questions about how I could afford something better. The clothes were a choice too. I invested in professional attire for client meetings, but I saw no reason to waste money on designer casual wear just to impress people who weren't paying attention anyway. Richard looked genuinely pained. Zoe, what can we do to fix this? How can we make this right? I considered his question carefully. Dad, you can start by understanding that this isn't something that gets fixed with an apology and a fresh start. For 3 years, you've treated me like a burden.
while I was building something remarkable. You gave Trevor a vice presidency in your company, while offering me the possibility of maybe, someday, being considered for entry-level work. You bought Iris thousands of dollars in equipment for a hobby, while I was generating six figures in revenue. The comparisons were brutal, but accurate. I could see the shame building in Richard's expression as he finally understood the magnitude of his favoritism. And Natasha, I turned to address my stepmother directly, you've spent years trying to push me out of this house while I was actually successful enough to buy a better one. Every comment about me needing to grow up, every suggestion that I was holding back your perfect family, all of it was based on assumptions that were completely wrong. Natasha's carefully maintained composure finally cracked completely. "I didn't know," she whispered. "I thought you were just... I thought Trevor and Iris were more motivated, more successful." More successful? I laughed again, this time with genuine amusement. Trevor's salary managing construction projects is less than what I make in a typical month. Iris's photography business has generated exactly zero profit despite thousands in startup costs. But somehow they were the successful ones? The truth was devastating because it was undeniable. Numbers don't lie. And the numbers painted a clear picture of who had actually achieved what in our family. "Here's what's going to happen," I said, my voice taking on the authoritative tone I used in business negotiations. "I'm going to drive my new car to my new condo, where I'll continue running my successful business. You all are going to go home and think about how you want our family relationships to look going forward, because everything changes from today." I got back into the Mercedes and started the engine. The sound was even more satisfying this time, representing not just luxury, but vindication. Through the windshield, I could see my family standing there, looking lost and confused, finally understanding that the family dynamics they'd taken for granted had been shattered forever. "The girl you thought needed your guidance and support just graduated summa cum laude while running $1 million business," I called out through the open window. "Maybe it's time you figured out what kind of relationship you want to have with her."
As I write this story 6 months after that dramatic graduation day, I'm sitting in my penthouse condo overlooking Biscayne Bay, watching the sunrise paint the Miami skyline in shades of gold and pink. The view from my floor-to-ceiling windows is breathtaking, but what's even more beautiful is the sense of peace I found in finally living authentically as myself. Coastal Digital Solutions has continued to thrive beyond my wildest expectations. We now employ 12 full-time staff members and manage digital marketing campaigns for over 120 businesses across Florida. Our annual revenue has exceeded $2.3 million, and we've been approached by 3 different investment firms interested in funding our expansion into other markets. Kai and I are considering offers to franchise our business model, which could potentially make us multimillionaires by the time we're 30. The Mercedes-AMG that shocked my family that day has been joined by a Tesla Model S for daily driving and a classic Porsche 911 that I bought myself for my 23rd birthday. But more than the cars, more than the luxury condo, more than the growing bank accounts, what I value most is the respect I've earned from the business community and the genuine relationships I've built with people who see me for who I truly am. My relationship with my family has evolved in ways I never could have predicted. The immediate aftermath of graduation day was painful for everyone involved. Richard spent weeks in what could only be described as a depression, finally understanding how completely he'd failed as a father to his biological daughter. He'd spent years celebrating mediocrity in Trevor and Iris while dismissing excellence in me, and the realization devastated him. The conversation that changed everything happened 3 weeks after graduation. Richard showed up at my condo unannounced, looking older and more vulnerable than I'd ever seen him. He didn't try to justify his behavior or make excuses. Instead, he simply said, "I failed you, Zoe. I failed you as a father, and I failed your mother's memory by not seeing the incredible woman you'd become. I can't change the past, but I want to earn the right to be proud of you going forward." That conversation lasted 4 hours. We talked about Mom, about the pain of losing her, about how Natasha's influence had poisoned his perception of me, and about the future we might build together. It wasn't easy, and there were plenty of tears,
But for the first time since Mom's death, I felt like I was talking to my real father, instead of the man Natasha had molded him into. Richard has since made dramatic changes in his life. He asked Natasha for a divorce, finally recognizing how her manipulation had damaged his relationship with me and distorted his priorities. The divorce was finalized last month, and while it was expensive and emotionally draining, Richard says it was necessary to reclaim his integrity and his family. Trevor's reaction to my success has been more complicated. The initial shock gave way to resentment, then gradually to a grudging respect. He struggled with the realization that his little stepsister had achieved more than he ever would, despite all his advantages. But to his credit, he eventually came to me asking for advice about digital marketing for Richard's construction company. Our business relationship has helped rebuild our personal one, and while we'll never be best friends, we've found a way to respect each other's strengths. Iris, surprisingly, has become my strongest advocate within the family. My success inspired her to take her photography business seriously, and she asked me to mentor her in building a sustainable business model. Together, we've transformed her hobby into a profitable portrait and event photography company. She's earning real money now, not just spending Richard's, and the confidence that comes from financial independence has made her a much more genuine person. Natasha, predictably, has struggled the most with the new family dynamics. She's tried several times to reconcile with Richard, apparently realizing too late that she'd destroyed something valuable in her efforts to marginalize me. Her attempts at apology to me have been transparent and self-serving, focused more on regaining her position than on genuine remorse. I've been polite but clear that our relationship will never be more than cordial. The business continues to grow in exciting directions. We've been featured on the cover of Miami Business Today, and I've been invited to speak at marketing conferences across the Southeast. Harvard Business School contacted me about potentially teaching a case study based on our company's growth strategy. The University of Miami has offered me an adjunct professor position in their business school, which I'm seriously considering.
But perhaps the most meaningful change has been in my personal life. Noah, the entrepreneur I'd been secretly dating during college, proposed to me last month. He'd been waiting for my family situation to stabilize before taking that step, understanding that I needed to resolve those relationships before I could fully commit to building new ones. We're planning a small wedding for next spring, and yes, my father will be walking me down the aisle. The penthouse has become a gathering place for my chosen family of fellow entrepreneurs, successful clients who've become friends, and the professors who believed in me when my biological family didn't. Last weekend, I hosted a dinner party for 20 people, and the conversation ranged from business strategy to art to travel plans. These are the relationships I treasure, built on mutual respect, shared interests, and genuine affection, rather than obligation or manipulation. Looking back on that graduation day, I sometimes wonder what would have happened if Richard hadn't made his cruel announcement. Would I have continued hiding my success indefinitely? Would our family relationships have continued to deteriorate slowly rather than exploding dramatically? I'll never know, but I'm grateful that the confrontation forced everyone to confront the truth. The lesson I've learned through all of this is that sometimes the people who should believe in us most are the ones who fail us most completely. But that failure doesn't define our worth or limit our potential. I spent years seeking approval from people who were determined not to give it, while building something remarkable that earned respect from people who mattered. To anyone reading this who feels underestimated by their family, dismissed by people who should support them, or held back by others' limited expectations, your worth isn't determined by their recognition. Build something so undeniable that they have no choice but to see you clearly. And if they still refuse to see you, build a new family of people who will. The Mercedes was never really about the car. It was about the moment when I stopped hiding who I was and started demanding the respect I'd earned. That moment changed everything, and I've never looked back. My name is Zoe Walker. I'm 23 years old, the CEO of a multi-million-dollar company, and the daughter who proved everyone wrong. And this is just the beginning of my story.
Up next, you've got two more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.